Hi, this is Tracy Swedlow, and this is Radio ITVT. The music you hear right now is something which enjoys the benefits of being processed through Bambu.Tech's platform. It is more immersive and more accurate, and the end of this particular recording is the opposite, so it's an A-B recording. We will play the entire length of the piece at the end of this interview, and also make a link available on our site. We are very happy to have Lloyd Trammell, who is one of the co-founders of a company called Bambu.Tech, and the URL for that is Bambu.Tech. So it's spelled B as in boy, A, M as in Mark, B as in boy, U, .tech. And they produce something called Awesome, or Advanced Wave Sound Method. It's a technology that preserves sound in its origination and then decodes it to make it sound as real and as authentic as possible. And we thought it might be interesting to talk to Lloyd, who is a well-known, famous sound engineer, someone who helped invent, technologies that allow sound to be digitized, or but actually I am not the expert. So Lloyd, welcome to the show. Tell me what it is that you invented.
Well, this particular thing is, I've invented many things, but this particular one is a quest from me and my co-inventor, John Gould. It's, I guess if you add both our times together, we're probably between 70 and 100 years of time together working on this thing. And our quest is to make the stuff sound as real as it does when you're sitting there listening.
Right. So, and one of the reasons I thought this might be an interesting interview in some ways, outside the box, because we normally cover companies who are just dealing with visuals, is that the video experience, whether it's on a screen in front of you on a big screen, or on your watch or on your iPad or something like that, is it requires sound, right? The entire experience is still about sound. I think that famous quote, I think it was Lucas who said it's 50% of the experience, right? So I felt that the interactive TV, multi-platform TV community should know about some advanced sound technologies that are going to create, I think, a very, very beautiful experience for anything that is considered screened entertainment. And so we wanted to hear what this was. But back to my original question, so people understand the context, tell me a little bit about why you are written in the history books. What did you contribute, if you could just verbalize that? I know you said you did a lot of things, but you were involved in the very early days of digital.
The very early stage of MIDI, for instance, and everybody uses MIDI for something now. Originally, we just intended it to let some synthesizers talk to each other and play their data between different manufacturers and stuff, but it grew and became show control, all kinds of things now. In fact, one of the things I did was when Pink Floyd did Momentary Lapse of Reason, I helped set up the computers so that I would say about 80% of the show was controlled by MIDI, which was something that people hadn't even thought of at that time.
Do you think that that we'll have sort of an AI experience where an entire conference could be directed using your technology, but using AI, artificial intelligence, to create a complete sound experience without the creator being involved? I know that Brian Eno experiments with automatically generated sound.
Well, yeah, Eno was, he's one of the pioneers of it. I have great respect for that man. Even back when he was in Roxy Music, for instance. I mean, that goes way, way back.
Well,
but, it's people like that change the world, that think out of the box and think differently.
I totally applaud that. So let's talk a little bit about, why you decided to co-found this company with John Gould, and exactly what is AWSM, AWSM, Advanced Wave Sound Method. Why did you find this company? Why did you feel it was necessary?
Well, I've listened and suffered with what people call 3D audio for many, many years. It just doesn't sound right to me. And so we started working on, well, first we started discussing why doesn't it sound the same? And, there's a lot of physics involved here, like reflections, the size of a room. The Helmholtz theory comes into play because a specific room size has a specific resonant frequency. And because he and I both grew up with synthesizers of all kinds, we knew a lot about things like additive synthesis. An additive is just harmonics building on each other to create new waves and new harmonics, things like that. And so we started trying to analyze, why are these 3D things sounding so fake all the time instead of sounding real? Excuse me. So we
Wait,
just started studying.
but before you go into that, because I'm not knowledgeable about sound issues, but what is 3D audio? How does it differ from what came before it?
Well, what is intended to be 3D audio now is kind of like surround sound, but they try to do it with more sources than just 5.1. And they want you to feel like it's an immersive experience, but it's all a linear experience. It's not dynamic. It doesn't change. If you have sounds panned to certain areas, you have to pan them manually to another area in order to make them sound like they're moving and stuff. Where in reality, there's more than just the sound panning. It's the harmonics change, lots and lots of things.
Okay, so please continue about why you decided to form Bambu.
Okay, we're both we're getting older now, so we started thinking more about money than we did when we were younger, and we're just giving this stuff away. My first thing that I did that was pretty cool in audio was I worked with the guys that started SRS when it wasn't even SRS, when it was still Hughes Aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And we developed a product called the AK-100, the Hughes Aircraft AK-100, which is still kind of a legendary piece of gear because it would take a mono signal and turn it into stereo, or take stereo and start trying to turn it into surround audio. And it did that pretty darn well. From there, we just continued on. Like I was saying, I was young then and pretty much gave it away.
Why would Hughes Aircraft want surround audio?
That kind of made me wonder too, but they had an audio division in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they became Hughes Audio when they put out the first commercial product, and then they became SRS, and they were that for many years, and now they were bought by DTS, and I'm not sure, I think they're still around under the DTS label.
Okay.
But it's the holy grail of audio is to make something completely immersive that sounds completely real, which means not only is it to your left and your right, but it's your front and back, above and below where the user is. Because there's reflections of audio that come from everywhere to create a real, honest 3D surround or environment.
I remember in the early 90s, I went to a conference and it was all about the early days of VR, because that's how I really got started. And Jaron Lanier, who is one of the founders of the VR sort of movement, as it were, put a bunch of instruments on the stage, and various people were playing them, but with their hands and gestures and things like that. I don't know what they were made of, but one by one, each person left the stage and there was this sort of immersive sound. And there were other experiments like that where you would walk into a room and you would be surrounded by sound. But I don't know if this is the same kind of technology, or it probably isn't. But were you aware of those experiments?
Oh yeah, very much, very much. Those are static processes, though. You have to tell it where your audio is going to be, and if it does move, there's something that's telling it how to move, how much time, where it's going. With our process, Ours is analyzing very, very quickly in real time. As soon as the audio comes in, it's looking at phase relationships, harmonic content, dynamic range, and analyzing those. And by doing that, it knows where the sound is supposed to be and starts trying to put it there. And also, we take it a little further because everybody wants to customize their sound. You can't just take one sound and say everybody loves this, because it's just not the same. So ours, we can allow the user to have certain controls to change the tonality of the sound, or even say the stereo width or something. It just depends on what our customer asks us to do, because we can pretty much do anything.
So the goal is to, I think I was reading on your site, preserve the detail, the intricacy, and the nuance before a file is compressed, and then restore audio quality after it's decompressed by removing the artifacts, distortions, and anomalies compression adds.
That's correct.
And in the process, you're also supposed to, I believe it's about delivering that kind of experience, but is it compressed, or is it a different type of compression? It's not your typical type of compression, but it still allows you to deliver a small file, correct?
That's correct. We don't really, we're not compression really. We work on the PCM layer stuff. So most audio, I'd say 99.9% of audio, once it hits your computer, it turns into PCM audio. And so that's where we live. I did it that way so we could be compatible with anything there is, like FLACs, MP3s, AACs. It doesn't matter. It all changes to PCM when it gets into some kind of device. And then as it comes out, it either plays out as PCM on the speaker in that device, or it is changed to something else. Now, if we could take a 128 MP3, for instance, even though MP3s are slowly getting phased out, we can take that MP3 in real time, analyze it, see what's missing, sort of decompress everything, put our process on it, and correct all the phase anomalies and all the nasty things that was added in there when it was compressed. And then they can recompress it as it goes out and change it back to the exact same size of 128 MP3, but we sound more like the CD than a 128 MP3. And that's kind of bending the laws of physics a little bit, because you're not supposed to be able to have the dynamic and the frequency range. But when you clean up a lot of the stuff and you understand additive synthesis, there's ways to build all these harmonics back in there to where it sounds just like it did before.
So you can do backwards compatibility.
Exactly.
But to me, it also sounds like you're playing with quantum mechanics somehow, that you're managing, how the waves interact with each other. Is that correct? Are you you're
Yeah,
physicists?
yeah, we do that, but see, we learned to do that because we were there when they started doing synthesis. And so we learned all of these things, how to build different sounds, what harmonics are in different sounds, how to control those harmonics. Then when we got to sampling, keyboards and stuff, I mean, we had no memory at all to work with. So we had to figure out how to make big, lush sounds with no memory. And so everything we learned in all the different types of synthesis, including resynthesis, we just put those to use and learned more and more as we went. And because there weren't that many rules at that time, we were able to create our own rules, or bend what rules they had.
What is resynthesis?
Resynthesis is a way that it analyzes an input, an audio input of some kind, and then attempts to digitally reconstruct that through phase, time, and frequency manipulation.
It sounds like some kind of, like, I can see Scotty at the teleportation console, you know,
Yeah,
playing
we
with the
make jokes about
with
that.
the dial. What?
We joke about that all the time, the Scotty one.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like. You're like playing with the frequency of the electrons coming in, right? In and out. Um, Okay, but let's talk about how have you how or have you been have you seen any experiments using this for uh, immersive video experiences to bring it back to the the topic that our audience is interested in, but I'm sure this could be really used for VR, you know, anything where people want to feel like they're immersed in a sound experience, because why would you want to immerse yourself in a 3D world unless the sound seemed real as well, and even maybe more real than real, right? Something
That's exactly right.
thoroughly.
And,
Yeah, so what do you think about that?
well, I've done a lot of research on this, and VR usually requires a lot of channels of audio. And to have that many channels of audio at one time and be able to transmit them on an internet that's already clogged and full, you're going to have to compress the heck out of them to make them small enough to send all of them at one time. That's going to degrade your audio. With our system, if you apply us to what is there now, we'll be able to assist them and be able to make those files small, but still have all the content in there. So it's so precise that even like a small bell or something, like someone played a triangle in something, and when you compress, like if you have a whole orchestra and there's a triangle player in the orchestra, you
Hmm.
compress you're not going to hear that triangle anymore.
Hmm.
But with our process, you'll hear every instrument in that sound field very, very clearly. So if someone was whispering and there's some guns going on and stuff, you probably are going to hear that whispering. If there's someone walking up behind you in a VR experience and maybe steps on a twig, and it's not exactly the quietest that there is, maybe you're at a stream or somewhere and there's a roar, you would still hear that click, even though there is a loud roar there.
Does your technology allow for, I want to call it dynamic sound, but it's more like generating an immersive sound experience based on someone's actions, movements, in other words, I'm not sure what the word is for that. In other words, it's not a linear experience, right? It's sound created by movements that you can't predict in a VR environment. Maybe it's interactive or responsive, or there are sensors in it. Is that part of what you're trying to do?
No, we don't. We don't use sensors and things, even though we've been asked a couple of times to try to work with that kind of thing. So if someone moves their head to look up, they hear other things. But there are technologies that do that. But we can sit on top of those technologies and help them to be more realistic than if we weren't there. Because without our technology there, they're going to have to compress it quite a bit just to make everything fit. Because there's only so much space on the internet, and even if they run it from a DVD, there's only so much space on that DVD as well. So something has to be compressed. And unfortunately, in the world we live in, anytime something has to be sacrificed, it's always going to be audio. I learned that a long time ago when we were installing systems in airports and things, that if they needed to add another 10 feet to a wing, where's the first place they went to cut the budget? It was the audio budget.
Well, people,
Audio is always,
go ahead.
that's always the first place they look to cut.
It's people do say when they're watching content on YouTube, they may not be bothered by the audio quality, right? They might be okay with even the deconstruction of the video quality, but when the audio quality is really there, right? People obviously notice that, and they they thirst after that. Haven't you seen that as well? I mean, wouldn't you say that a better audio quality will drive a more positive experience with that piece of content, or do you feel like the average person doesn't care?
I get that one all the time too. I think the average person does care. If people didn't care about the quality of audio that they listen to, then, there's one really simple explanation. Just say, well, how come Beats is so big? because people want better audio. If they didn't want better audio, they didn't buy all those things just because of Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, even though that didn't hurt. They bought it because they thought they were getting better audio.
Well, I see all these podcasters and video bloggers and things like that, and little by little, all of them seem to have bigger microphones, more professional microphones that they're all using with filters and screens. And so it seems to me that that's exactly the question, the issue, that people expect better quality these days. So I would agree with you.
Right. Right. Well, microphone technology has advanced leaps and bounds in just the last, say, 8 years. Now you can get large diaphragm microphones for $100. 10 years ago, in fact, I bought 2 of them about 10 years ago, and I think I paid over $400 a piece for them. So, that technology changes very rapidly.
So how does all of this compare to other companies who are in the audio business? If you're able to talk, how Dolby's always saying that they're providing immersive sound for iPads and things like that. Are you able to sort of compare the two?
Yeah, Dolby is mostly they do a lot of compression on their audio, and they send very large files now. They're also an encode decode process with multiple channels. So we don't do that, even though you can apply this on top of Dolby. In fact, there's a couple of movie companies we're working with right now that one of the things they agreed with me is they didn't like is going to a theater and it's just loud as all get out. In fact, I wear earplugs when I go to movies now. That's so dang loud. But with our in there, they turn it up so loud because they can't hear everything. So you turn it up more if you can't hear everything. But if you can hear everything, then you can play it with less amplitude and not hurt your ears and still get a better experience than if it was loud.
Have you heard of the Barco Escape system where they're putting screens all around in the theater, like in 3 walls?
No, I've heard the Atmos system, but not that one.
Well, they're trying to create that sort of sense of immersion. I was just curious. It might be an interesting application for what you're offering. So, can you talk about any specific projects? I mean, you mentioned some movie studios. Can you mention what you're doing with them, or can you name names? And
not
please.
really, but I can say that I can talk about generalities.
Oh, okay.
So, like there's companies, I could say, like Netflix, but not Netflix, that stream content everywhere, all over the world. As a matter of fact, in different. Some of them are in China, some are here, some Australia, all over the place. They want to give their users a better experience, but they can't because the internet's full. They have to compress the audio and the video so much that when it gets to the end user, it's just acceptable by somebody's levels. It's nothing like what it started out as. But if they put our process on there, then we can help protect it and maintain it all the way through. And if you put our process in 2 different places, because our process is intelligent, if they do it on the encode, where they make the movies where they can transmit them, and then do it on the decode, we're say it. I don't know, we'll say it's Netflix. And when it gets to your house, if we're in that player, cable box or whatever, then anything that was messed up between the time it left there and the time it gets to you, it'll just rebuild only those parts because it's intelligent.
I think Patrick, who is a member of your team, mentioned that it's called adaptive intelligence.
Yes. And it is very adaptive, and it is truly intelligent because, like I say, when you make it sound exactly the way you want it to sound, when you ingest the material we'll just keep saying Netflix because everybody knows who Netflix is. So if you're doing it for Netflix, when they get the movies from the movie companies, they ingest it into their system. Well, when they do that, they have to compress everything, the video and the audio. So our system, when it's in the cable box, we've already fixed everything that you're going to mess up when you do the compression. You know, we've repaired the phase anomalies and put back some harmonics that need to be there, increased the dynamic range like it should have been. Then you really don't know how many times your signal is going to be compressed between where the Netflix streaming office is and your home. There could be 5 or 6 different times that it goes through different stations to get compressed to get to you. Our system is smart enough to know when it does finally get to you, if anything's have been messed up, it only fixes the things that are messed up. It's not like doing tone control where you can add, say, 1 dB here, and then when it gets to you, you add 1 dB again, and now you have 2 dB of some particular frequency. It's not like that at all. That would be considered static. Ours is dynamic, so it's always analyzing, looking at it, saying, well, this is what you're supposed to be, so let me try to create what you really are. I know it sounds very much like we're in Star Trek world, but it's kind of that thing.
I'm in favor of that, being a Star Trek fan. So I think that sounds very interesting. I'm kind of curious, what's the next step after this, or how are you planning to improve it? Is there a next generation, speaking of Star Trek, version of this, areas for improvement, or?
Oh yeah, there'll always be more and more. It's just like buying Microsoft Word. You know, they're always improving it. It never just stops. And that's what we'll do. In fact, there's been a couple of things that some customers lately, some automobile manufacturers have asked for a specific thing, and it's a psychoacoustic thing. Like, they want to add psychoacoustic bass because their speakers can't go as low as they want to. And I've never been a fan of psychoacoustics, but the last year I've known this question was coming, so I've been doing research. And about 2 weeks ago, I finally put the first system together to do psychoacoustic bass enhancement, and I was very successful. I was able to lower the amplitude of that speaker and add bass, and it sounds like it's a lot louder, but when you measure it with a dB meter, it's a little bit lower.
And define psychoacoustics for me, please.
It's kind of, and I learned this a long time ago from working on Hammond B3s. I'm a tube guy from when tube started, I think.
Uh-huh.
If you play like a first and a third, you'll hear the octave below the root come in, but you're not playing it, but you'll hear, your brain will be tricked into hearing that octave below the root note.
Mm.
So that's psychoacoustics. Your brain thinks it's hearing these things, but it's really not.
That sounds like Star Trek. That sounds like a super mind control kind of stuff. But it's interesting.
Well, I did a product at PV Electronics called Cosmos that started doing some of that, but we didn't do it quite as well as we should have because everybody wanted to make it as inexpensive as possible. But that particular product won national and international awards and sold extremely well. In fact, they're still using it today in their product lines. So it was, I must have done something right there.
And you know, the interactive TV or multi-platform TV business is very interested in voice control, right? And of course, Siri is so important today in detecting the quality of one's voice and figuring out, you know, how to do things for you based on what it hears in the room. Are you involved in enabling those types of technologies? Does that interest you, sort of the voice command business?
We're engaged with a couple of companies right now that supply the hardware for that kind of thing. And we're definitely helping improve the intelligibility, I guess is what you would call it. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a different, but intelligibility of what it hears, we're able to help that quite a bit. especially when there's other things around and you know the particular range of voice you need to listen to. We can make it very clear to the machine.
Well, that's the whole point of of all of these voice control systems, is trying to learn, from what it hears and to differentiate. And it sounds to me like that technology still has so long to go, but it's been an exciting last couple of years. So I'll be curious how do you guys help to improve all that?
I'm really kind of excited about that part because I think we can help a whole lot there.
All right. Well, I think that we've given everybody a nice overview of what you guys are doing. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, no, I think we've covered a lot here.
Okay, good. Well, thank you so much for being part of our radio ITVT, and my sound experience that we deliver to our community. I hope it was recorded at high quality for you when you hear it. I wish you would come over here and set up my studio, but no, I'm kidding. Because I don't know how to do all that. But anyway, thank you so much. So nice to meet you, and thanks to Patrick on the phone. Thank you, Patrick, who's a great team member of Bambu.Tech. So hopefully, maybe we'll hopefully see you at our shows coming up, or participating at some point down the road. And we look forward to hearing more news going forward. Very nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. I'm very thankful that you put us on here.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you, Patrick. That is Lloyd Trammell, who is the co-founder of Bambu.Tech, and we appreciate the fact that you're listening. Take care. This is Tracy Swedlow, Editor-in-Chief of Radio ITVT and ITVT.com, and the co-producer of the TV of Tomorrow show conferences. Our next one is coming up in December on the 7th in New York City. Take care.
Watching television. Watching television. Hey, I'm coming over, we won't have to talk. Let all the bright lights come out of the box. Ooh. Watching television. Watching television. All right now. Who knows who it is? Oh no! Woo! All right, thank you very much, Newtown Radio, and all our brothers out there and sisters.